Okay, we have a much smaller turnout, I think, than they had for the morning session so far, but we might as well get started. Matty, is that? Oh, deeper background. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I should probably share my screen, but first I'm going to share the collaborative notes document before I forget to do that. For those of you who it may be your first time here, RDA encourages people to contribute to the meetings via collaborative notes. All of the various meetings have these shared notes documents. So they're not meant to be talking head meetings where one person presents and then maybe like one or two people get to ask a question. There's an opportunity to share thoughts in the notes. There's opportunity to share thoughts in the sessions. And given that there's a very small turnout here at the moment, we can all share quite a bit if we want to. I will also, because I'm going to share my screen, I will also share a link to our ambassador charter, because this is something that I'm going to be talking about in depth, I guess, in this meeting. So let's go to the screen sharing bit. Okay, so welcome, good evening, good morning if it's morning somewhere else where you are. It's morning in some parts of Europe right now, I know. Marek and Matty, thank you very much for joining me very, very late on Thursday or early Friday morning, depending on how you look at it. We are here today to continue a conversation that we started in the Salzburg plenary. We had a Birds of a Feather session where we talked about launching an ambassadors group. And I think at that point in time, I was still calling it a domain ambassadors group because, of course, that BOF came out of earlier conversations and earlier experiences with things like the EOSC Future Project, which most of us here in the room today were actually a part of. So the EOSC Future Project funded a number of what we were calling RDA/EOSC Future ambassadors. And it was really meant to kind of bring support to EOSC goals from the RDA, but also ensure that there was a relationship between what was happening in EOSC and what RDA could offer, RDA being that opportunity to tap into the international community and far greater number of resources than even EOSC itself as the European Open Science Cloud, to explain my acronym, could offer. There was also some grantees who responded to open calls that weren't exactly given the label ambassador, but they kind of wound up together with wait, have I actually, sorry, this is late. Have I explained that we funded ambassadors? So RDA, EOSC Future, people applied. Sorry, Marek, I can see you shaking your head. Geez, it's okay, get this together. I have some notes here. The EOSC Future Project funded a number of RDA/EOSC Future ambassadors. I did say that bit. But these were ambassadors who came, they responded to open calls, and they came to EOSC Future/RDA with ideas about communities that they wanted to engage with, projects they wanted to finish, things that like maybe a little bit of money and a little bit of attention could help them to fulfill their goals. Like it's just that little bit of a push that they needed to get the work done. And alongside the ambassadors, this is what I was trying to say, we had a number of grantees who, some of them were affiliated with projects that were funded that were meant to add value to the European Open Science Cloud. And they all kind of got lumped into this pot of support, which Matty will talk a little bit about, I think, in his presentation. And they formed a little bit of a network. They started to support each other because they were they were working together towards similar goals. But there was a lot of variety, a lot of like cross-domain exchange, and a lot of opportunity for people to come and talk at each other's conferences or add value, a perspective on outputs that were being developed that we kind of just didn't want to let go of once the EOSC Future project ended. And we thought that it would make sense to pick this up and move it over into the RDA as an RDA Ambassador program. Now, of course, this is not necessarily a funded program, but it's a network that adds value in the same way that the ambassadors got value in networking with each other in order to obtain their goals. So we wanted to, so the BOF that happened in Salzburg was to encourage engagement across communities and across RDA. This is not, and I'm stealing from Alison, Alison Lister's session in the morning. She explained it as this is not a standard interest group. So we're having a little bit of difficulty figuring out exactly like how the ambassadors are going to function within RDA. So we want an interest group because that's like kind of the best mechanism available to us in order to have these conversations. But maybe it could be more than an interest group. Maybe it does something a little bit different from a standard interest group, or maybe it is a regular interest group. I don't know. We'll figure it out together what it is that we want this group to be. One thing we do want to use this group for is as a facilitator to promote cohesion across interest groups and working groups because ambassadors come from a variety of domains. And I'll get into the slides now because that will probably help me to fully explain that. So this session, we're going to talk a little bit background and history of grant-funded RDA ambassador programs, which I've already started to do. We'll talk about the RDA Ambassador IG Charter that we drafted, but is not finished yet, is something that we're still kind of putting the last pieces together, because again, we're not 100% sure exactly how to focus the energy and the interest in this group. We'll have an Alumni Ambassadors Roundtable presentations from European grantees. Well, actually Marek is here today to give us that presentation. And Matty is going to present as well from the perspective of the RDA representative who ran the grantee program, who really was the hands-on support person for the grantees and for the ambassadors. We'll try during this session to pitch ideas for increasing connectivity between research communities and RDA, and then move on to next steps. How do we broaden the interest group beyond Europe? Because we started with a group of European ambassadors, and we still kind of mostly have a group of European ambassadors, which means we're still just talking to ourselves about what it is that we want to do. We have a strong network here, but we want to be able to expand it. And then we'll talk about, I guess, kind of where we're going to go with finalizing this group charter. So a little bit more background of the grant-funded RDA Ambassador Program. As I mentioned, it came out of EOSC Future, but there was also, EOSC Future was actually the second time that they ran a funded program like this. There was also the RDA for EOSC, a previous funding program that did a similar sort of thing. And now in that previous funding program, the RDA for EOSC ambassadors, they didn't maintain their network after the fact. That group is still active for the most part in RDA, but they're active individually doing different things. We've managed to rope them into a couple of conversations and events that we've hosted alongside the new group of ambassadors. And so we are kind of scooping some of them up and bringing them along with this development here. But for the most part, we saw what happened there. And we thought we don't want that to happen again to the EOSC Future ambassadors. We want to do something to support this network a little bit better so they stay connected and they stay supported effectively. So the domain ambassadors from RDA EOSC Future, there were 14 of them that were funded, and they came from different scientific communities, hence the name domain ambassadors. For many of them, as I mentioned, the grant was kind of an opportunity to launch efforts they had been wanting to get off of the ground, to create resources that they wanted to update, and to position themselves as representatives within their communities. Like Francis, if he were here, would probably say he really liked the ambassador title, being able to call himself that. Marek, you're nodding your head. You've said the same thing. It sort of opens doors. That, like, I am the representative for my community. I am the correct person to talk to, and I have a little bit of authority behind what I say because I've been recognized in a particular way. And I think when we get into the discussion document, although please feel free to drop notes into it throughout this conversation or interrupt me, please, you can go ahead and do that. We will talk a little bit more about what that means. Okay, so this group gave people kind of a push to do things that they wanted to be doing. So one of the things that we recognize, the value add from domain ambassadors, is that in addition to community outreach, they've kind of become this like linchpin between communities and RDA. There's a lot of feedback going in both directions, and there's value add to the RDA community. And we want to hold on to that as well. There were outputs that were created for RDA that were posted on, maybe I shouldn't be talking about the RDA website right now, but there used to be things on the RDA website that probably we will find there again someday. Info sheets and disciplinary pages and resources that benefit both the communities and RDA.
Those are actually linked to the page that I sent. So they should be available.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Matty. I haven't been paying attention to the chat. There isn't anything in here I need to know. Okay, perfect. Okay, so some of the reasons why we thought we needed this group from the perspective of the current, well, at the time, current domain ambassadors for EOSC Future. There aren't disciplinary groups that fit everybody's discipline. Some of them were not represented. Some of them since then have actually started BOFs and tried to launch interest groups that are related to their areas of research, but that is a huge undertaking. And it isn't always possible for someone to lead a new interest group just because they happen to represent a particular community. So it'd be nice if there was an interest group that was a kind of cross-domain interest group, but a lot of there are a lot of interest groups that do function that way, but they function that way over topics or over particular needs, whereas this could be a little bit maybe more open and fluid. RDA needs people who are available to speak on subjects. You know, sometimes you look at the resources that are available to you and you think like, oh, it would be really great if I knew this person or if I could connect with this person who is doing this type of work. And ambassadors can put their hands up and say, we're the ones that are available that can come and talk if you need somebody to talk about needs of a particular community or subject. They create this network of people to collaborate with. So conferences, presentations, webinars. Community view into other disciplines. When you have somebody read over a resource and they're not an expert in your field, but they are an expert in other ways, or they're familiar with RDA, the data stewardship needs of other communities, it just adds a little bit of extra value to the work that you're outputting. You know it's going to be understandable to anyone who is reading your resources or listening to your talk or whatever it is you're creating. Opportunity to connect with others who want to utilize RDA outputs. That's kind of a big thing that I think we probably should talk about a little bit more, is that there's a lot of really good work that comes out of RDA and not a lot of evidence of how to use it well or how it is being used out in the wild, maybe is the best way to put it. And domain ambassadors can be those people who are saying, no, I am recommending these outputs. I have talked to policymakers about this particular output, or I've talked to a disciplinary community, we're using this resource. That is really, could be really valuable to a lot of RDA interest groups and working groups to have another interest group that they turn to that says, how is this being used? How could you use it? And then would you report back to me if you do in fact use it? We can capture experience administering and participating in grant funded ambassadorships. And Matty is definitely going to talk a little bit more about that, because one of the lessons learned or takeaways from now having run the ambassador program twice over is that there are some lessons learned about how to administer grants, how to organize people, how to network, etc. Provide an entry group to RDA groups. Want to join RDA? Ask an ambassador. It seems like it could be a very newcomer friendly kind of group to form, and the ambassador interest group could function that way. All right, so let's talk about the charter. So that was kind of the hopes for what an interest group could be from the domain ambassadors. Then we got into, after Salzburg, we did do a little bit of work on developing a charter, and we got into the weeds about like, can we do all of these things? Should we be focusing on any aspect of these things? What are the other possibilities for how someone could benefit from being recognized as an ambassador? So effectively, how do we organize a group of enthusiastic people who are all working on different things for different audiences? And I did put a link to the charter in the document earlier, and I don't think we've had anybody else join since then. So you should have those links. Okay, so then we presented this to people in Salzburg, and we got some feedback from the audience there from our Birds of a Feather session. That was what really started off our work on the charter. And I apologize, you probably can't really read this Menti screenshot, but it's kind of there as a visual to let you know that we did do a Menti meter, and we invited people to give us feedback about the benefits that they might perceive from a group called an ambassador IG. What would being an RDA ambassador mean to them? And kind of the key takeaways that we summarized for that BOF in Salzburg were that it would be a useful entry point for many new RDA members. So again, I guess kind of the last point on that previous slide, we've moved up in importance is that ambassadors seem like they could be a really obvious first group to start with the RDA. The domain ambassador IG could also provide a smaller network within a network. We kind of recognize that RDA has gotten huge. There's a lot of people who are participating in RDA. Maybe they're not all like regularly active members, but they're signed up for various things, and it can be hard to figure out like who's really active, who's doing something, who, if you do need to talk to somebody about a particular issue, how do you find them through the RDA? If you had that kind of network within a network, then those ambassadors are the ones that you could turn to say, I'm looking for X, can you help me? Can you help me connect with RDA better? So help professionals and researchers at any stage of their career to connect with others. We also recognize that this IG could be a valuable source of bottom-up feedback to the RDA Secretariat or to the organizational board tab, etc. Any group seeking targeted feedback on finalizing and delivering outputs. If you want an audience for things, you want to ask somebody how they might use your outputs, the ambassadors could be that group that you turn to. Okay, so charter development, high-level benefits. Bring the social capital and networking possibilities of the Research Data Alliance back down to a smaller, more accessible scale. And again, particularly with a focus on newcomers for RDA. Support engaged individuals in outreach within their communities. These are themes that are coming out of our charter development. Facilitate interaction among RDA groups, and create opportunities for mentorship and recognition. So that is something that I haven't actually talked about yet, but it's implied by the ambassador title meaning something. Would you need to, in joining the interest group, would you need to put your name forward in such a way that you're saying, I would want to act as a mentor, or I would want to be recognized for my participation in this group, that is perhaps one of those ways where this might be a non-standard interest group, and we want to consider how we could facilitate that, or how we would recognize the contributions. All right, specific objectives. So those were our high-level objectives that are coming out of charter development, is to leverage a cross-domain network of people engaged in a diversity of work. Basically provide a forum where you can get together and talk about stuff with people who get what you're trying to do, but aren't necessarily, again, all, you know, in the same domain of work or in the same mindset. So you get this cross-domain network that you can bounce ideas off of. Facilitate dissemination and adoption, provide feedback for RDA output. So we want to make sure that what RDA is producing is getting used, and that we get feedback on how it is getting used. Support conversations between communities, sharing expertise and best practices. There could be opportunities, not just for the ambassadors to talk across domains, but for them to connect communities as well. And build on existing networking capacity with RDA by signposting possible collaborations for groups and individuals. Again, networking is in there a lot. Identify specific questions and issues that should be addressed by working groups and formal RDA recommendations. We could be, I suppose, a bit of an idea factory. Let's throw things out there and make the other groups deal with them. And increase visibility of the ambassadors and other facilitator networks. So we recognize that there are other programs that encourage this type of champion activity and that facilitate outreach. And so can we improve the visibility, not just of our own ambassadors, but other networks? And I know that Alison has mentioned the Fair Sharing Community Champions could be one of those networks that we work with. All right, and I have talked longer than I planned to, but I think we have time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, because I think this is where I'm going to hand it over to Matti first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that was kind of good setting the goalpost kind of story in. So I'm kind of diving a little bit deeper into sort of short-term activities. So this is kind of reflecting on the funniest experience and most rewarding experience in the office I had, that started in September 22 and lasted, well, until today roughly. It was a year and a half of working with the project called EOSC Future. And EOSC Future came from, let's say, the traditional infrastructure, traditional big data groups. So you had your CERNs, you had your Earth observation and so on. So really focus was on fairly standardized data. I mean, back in the day when petabyte was still kind of considered something newsworthy, then it started from that and building these federated infrastructures and so on. EOSC Future was one of these sort of latest mega projects in that domain in Europe that is basically trying to look into how you can use this kind of model of sharing resources in other domains. And part of it was then targeted to engaging with the RDA community. So the project as a whole was about 40 million euros, and 1 million euros was reserved for third-party support. So you had essentially the project that was had gone through this evaluation process and so on. It was running its own kind of mini competition. So you had independent reviewers, evaluation committee to ensure that everything is transparent. Then you funded altogether about 40 grants. So in addition to 14 domain ambassadors, there were 26 projects that typically were, I think in principle, they were supposed to run only 6 months. So you had very intense time period when you tried to do some kind of concrete work that was kind of bringing together RDA outputs and the European Open Science Cloud. So it was fairly large set of contacts and networks, because you had, of course, the project itself, the EOSC Future, I think they had roughly about 100 partners. So you had, let's say, quite a lot of people to interact with and so on. This kind of brings you to the first challenge in a way. So there's this popular number where they say that, okay, you can really know only 150 people. So I think in the end, I was supporting 30 grants together. So, and initially it was quite overwhelming because you're trying to learn the names of the people, what they are doing, what they're interested in, and so on, because my idea was that the real value of bringing these people together and giving them this grant funding, it's not only the original plan, but it's basically what happens when you put these people together and they start thinking about, okay, hey, get this surprising connection between different domains and so on. And I think facilitating this and identifying these opportunities, it's basically possible only within the Dunbar space. You need to know the people, you need to anticipate what they might be interested in, and then you do the introductions and so on. So jumping into the first line support role, it really makes you aware of this, that there is a limit. Challenge 2, because you handed this chunk of money to an organization that was basically doing open calls the first time around. So it was for individuals that were doing these sort of calls or running these calls, and then people who applied, we were actually sort of working on first of its kind processes. And it was quite complex because within European Union, the funding rules and so on, it wasn't always clear in a way. What were you allowed to do with this, with the grant? So you had this sort of consultations, you went to the commission and asked that, okay, can you do this and so on. So you were kind of at the bottom of the learning curve in terms of you're doing this first time, and then because of these delays, you were basically the peak of the forgetting curve. So you had quite a long delay in launching the project from the start. So this sort of creates its own problems in terms of scheduling and so on, because some of the opportunities they might not be there all the time. So looking back, what worked, what could or what would have worked, I think one thing that kind of I got halfway there is that whenever you have a meeting or something like that, you make sure that it's just one click. You have the meeting invitation, it has linked to the rolling minutes, and then the rolling minutes has the basically link collection to everything that you might need to run the project and so on. So it sounds trivial, but I mean, it's surprising how many times you kind of need to chase after your emails after you accept it and you start the Zoom, and then you need to go and look for these. And I think it just goes back to this sort of mental bandwidth of the people, how you sort of release it to something that is actually creative. Standardizing things, so collecting input. If I was to do this program again, I would, from the day one, I would do a web form where you would have categories of outputs that I agreed with the funding agency. I would basically park myself at the funding agency or whoever is running the program until we have the categories. So you set it up once, and then you always have the same link that if something newsworthy happens, you go to the same link, you fill in the web form, click submit, and so on. I think we did a couple of evolutions of the reporting. I think we improved a little bit, but it was still sort of not really suitable for humans at the end of the project. I think the last bit, I think I ended up doing quite a lot of storytelling. I have worked a little bit on science communication. So a lot of these meetings, I was kind of essentially a little bit like embedded journalist. So I was asking questions like curious 4-year-old that okay, can you actually sort of, is it kind of like this? And then people usually say, well, yeah, not, well, kind of, but actually maybe more like this. And it's always this sort of explanation, like explaining why this sort of my strawman was wrong, that actually then help people to probably help them to understand each other. At least it was also very, very useful for me. So essentially leveraging the ignorance to promote and facilitate the connections. I think that probably worked quite well. So just a recommendation, if you're running an outreach program like this, ambassadors or project or something like that, just budget for sufficient staffing. You need to have these meetings just for tracking purposes, making sure that people know what's going on. So you might as well turn them into something that actually has sort of innovation potential. Defining outputs, templates, and so on. I think these are the things that really save time for everybody. For the interest group, I would really sort of emphasize that we should look beyond the ambassadors. I think ambassador term is extremely important. Like Marek said, it opens the doors, but ambassador, like if you have just the ambassadors and they don't have the diplomatic corps around them, then the impact kind of falls short. So we need special envoys, we need attachés and so on, and we need sort of explanation what these roles mean. I think we talked about the social capital. I think the interest group would serve a role there, kind of retaining, and also they have these subgroups, and I think people who got funded through the same program, they always have this sort of more tightly knit relationship, but then linking these sort of small subgroups together, I think that's something that the interest group really would do. And then finally, if you end up in a similar role, don't panic. I think people self-select into these sort of outreach roles. So you find these patient, forgiving, generally nice people, especially in this domain. Of course, this also applies to the RDA in general, but I think we are still kind of, let's say, a special group of people that kind of seek out these roles. So yeah, with this, I just sort of want to say that I'd be happy to sort of run with the idea with you. So thank you. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to take them now.
Thanks very much, Matti. I love, like, you just have you can tell your science journalism background once you said that, because you have a really good way of telling a story through slides, which is not easy to do, to make interesting and make it seem like it's got a little bit of personality. I don't know how you do it, but you have a talent. All right.
Kind of, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark.
I think there's this old story of like, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one. So you start with the 20 slides and then you leave the 5 that actually work. So
it's not a bad, like, it's like anything that you're writing. If you have to do long form reports or whatever, it's so much easier to cut stuff out than it is to try and put something onto a blank page. But still, it came together very nicely.
So,
all right. I don't know if there are any questions from our audience, because this is all very new, I suspect. Marek, would you like to share your slides and do a bit for us about your experience being a EOSC Future Ambassador?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm trying to find where it is. I apologize.
No, it's okay. We got time.
No.
Yeah, we can see
You
your
see the PowerPoint.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just a second. I couldn't find the right version.
This is what happens when we try to do things after midnight.
Yep. Now?
Yes, we got it.
Wonderful. Okay, sorry. It's really late here, or early, whatever you wish. Thanks for giving me the opportunity a little bit to speak about my experience with the ambassadorship. Actually, I was very, very new in this field. I am a biochemist and immunologist. I'm running a research group. I'm still running the research group with PhD candidates and undergrad students and so on, with a lot of microscopes and samples and so on and so on. But at the same time, I'm trying to help my colleagues and of course myself with the data management, and also a little bit my colleagues in EOSC or other associations or activities, to keep this data management story really useful for researchers. This is my main reason why I stepped into this field, is that it's not a burden, but it's something what is very, very useful. So but at the end of 2022, if I remember correctly, yes, I became my proposal was accepted, and I became RDA EOSC Future Ambassador for a domain which is not very strongly engaged in these activities, domain called Material Sciences and Engineering. Actually, talking to the researchers in this field, people would tell you, or even now, maybe now a little bit less, but at the time when I was starting, they would tell you that there is nothing for this domain, which was not true. There were quite some activities for research data management of material scientists and engineers, but it was extremely scattered and not very much communicated to the community. So where I've seen my role was to enhance engagement of this underrepresented discipline, and also a little bit to try to harmonize or help those who are developing tools and other resources for research data management in this domain, and to little bit to start communicating together, and also showing the researchers that this is available, and it's and often it's very useful, such as domain-specific repositories, or there is even a controlled vocabulary for this domain, and very, very few people still know about it. So this is really the role which I did, and which I'm still doing, because I still feel like RDA ambassador. I like the title, and
we
I
haven't
try.
let you go. We
That's
haven't
good.
let you. Yeah, we're holding
That
on to you, Marek. Sorry.
I'm happy, and yeah. So the funding helped me to get more involved in some conferences which were very useful, such as EOSC symposia or RDA plenaries. Also, it helped me to engage with the community at their own conferences, such as Second International Symposium of Materials, which sounds very much focused on materials or some research and development, but actually behind this title is activity of a Korean team, and these people are more focused on how to organize data in our community, in this community of material scientists and engineers. So it was very useful because they brought together European and Asian activities, and that was without being RDA ambassador or without funding. I don't think I would be able to. I would probably not even be contacted to join this symposium, because it was not totally publicly announced. It was all rather quickly organized by the Korean Institute of Science and Technology. Yeah, and it was in Germany. So was very useful for me because I could travel there easily, even in the busy time. And one of the things which I did over my ambassadorship is I created a website which is called Data Materialized. Yeah, I would still call it a beta version because the text was not yet polished. I didn't have time over the last few months to really bit go through the text and make it more mature. But I have now quite some feedback from my friends from this field. And over the summer, I aim to really make the website mature. What is the difference on this website? It's really for dummies. If you know nothing about research data management and you are just busy running in experiments in your lab, this is how the website is designed for you. I know that there is, for example, RDM kit from Elixir, which is also very useful, or some other websites, but they are much more professional. So and they contain a lot of information. So in my website, I actually really focus on also on key messages, and I'm not trying to expand it. There are a lot of links in the website, and this will be kept, but I don't want actually to expand the website. Maybe we will do some clone of the website or something like that, but the website should be as simplistic as it is now. So these are the results, and I was also asked to say what would help me in the future. I fully agree with Francis that being RDA ambassador is a sport team, and that's fantastic. Thanks to Beth and Matti and others, that it was a team sport, and without this fact, it would be far less successful definitely on my side. So that was very, very good, and I'm very happy that you actually continue this collaboration, because that's what I'm answering, that what is necessary for the future to keep these collaborative meetings. They don't have to be very often, but at least, yeah, it's always the problem, what is the right frequency, which is if it's too low or too high, always bad. So someone has to do it, and people are just coming randomly, but it's still very fine, because it doesn't matter that the fact that people, not always the same people, are on these meetings. I would actually strongly recommend to try to keep some workshops of ambassadors during plenary or whatever. I do not know how to do it, because these in-person meetings are invaluable. Of course, this is unbelievably useful. For example, in Göteborg, it was that for me was rather early phase of me being ambassador, and it was superbly useful. That many of ambassadors and also the support team were in person present there. And what I would tell others thinking about if they want to think about becoming ambassador, Matti already mentioned my message that ambassadorship unlocks doors quite clearly. I can document it in many cases. You can also get quite some new friends from this community, because it's a really nice bunch of people. So I'm very happy that I joined, because I found quite nice friends there. And very useful is, of course, the direct and very rapid access, sometimes very nicely explained what the activities in this world are by the colleagues, not only by the support team, but by other ambassadors. It was always very useful to get very quickly and very precisely defined information. So that's all from me for now. I'm ready to answer any questions about how I feel being ambassador.
Thanks very much, Marek. I made some notes in the collaborative document, because I realized that I should be taking notes while you're talking. I have a question for you about your web resource that you created as part, because that's something that you knew that you wanted to do going into the ambassadorship. So would something like having to write a plan saying that I want to be an ambassador in order to do X be valuable to, like, was that part of the experience, that you think you got the resource you wanted because you set up front that I'm going to deliver this resource? Is that something we should maybe consider?
Yeah, definitely. Without the support, it would be difficult to do it, because I needed some resources to fund software and so on, and time, of course, to
money
dedicate.
Came along with it.
yeah, so that helped, but also, of course, as I mentioned, probably the most valuable were the meetings with other ambassadors and with other people, and the opportunity to join the conferences, because then of course I became more and more experienced, and the quality of the website is increased. So yeah, it's kind of balanced what was more important. But of course, the fact that I promised it was very important. I think if I would not promise it to EOS Future, I would never do it. Oh, well, I would start, I would create some half product, but I would never ever finish it. So even now, I still, even though it's okay-ish, but it's not perfect, and I still feel that I have to improve it. And I'm still fine. I will do it.
Well, yeah, because once something is out there, then then it's like maintaining it and always thinking, oh, I could have added a little bit more, I could have done it. But it's getting that first step of getting it published, getting what you have out there so that others can use it. Because as you mentioned, you're one of the underrepresented communities, or at least you were an underrepresented community, probably both in RDA and in the European Open Science Cloud. But there was information out there. There were people who were creating resources that were valuable to the material sciences community. And it just it was about bringing that knowledge to the community and putting it into language that they could understand. So if they didn't know anything about data stewardship, it still made sense why they would, want to use these tools or what the benefit would be to them. I think it's always a challenge to start with that very early messaging of why do you need to do open science in the first place?
Yeah, this is what I tried to do there a little bit, not going too far. From the feedback I have, the most popular is of course the dog, because it's illustrated by my daughter, and that she came up with the idea that there will be Alfred, the dog, and Alfred is helping people, and there are more actually in the summer. The updated version will have even more illustrations because she prepared new ones. So this may make this website quite popular because the dog is very popular. Everyone wants now the dog Alfred.
She should get into illustration. She's got a future career there, I think.
Yeah, actually, the original idea comes from my wife, not from my daughter, but she was able to create all the rest.
So I love the idea that data
business.
stewardship is a family family affair.
No, they liked it. I have ideas, and I didn't have enough time, so everyone was helping me in house.
But I think in some ways this was also a very good example of because these calls, for the most part, they were targeting people who were established in their field, and the funding was top-up funding, so it wasn't really intended to, like, I mean, of course you could take a leave of absence and work on something, but for the most part it was making it possible to go to the conferences and so on, and giving this little bit of this sort of thinking room in a way that you didn't need to submit application or something like that, and then in the end, yeah, you come up with the whole website doing RDM in addition to sort of funding these conference trips and so on, and it sort of I think the second slide I had was this example of when you did this analysis of just totaled up the numbers of outputs that you get with the €1 million investment, and because of the reporting practices, they were far from practice. I'm sure that if we did the exercise again, we would probably get even higher numbers. So in terms of let's say value for money, it was pretty amazing. So I think, Rosalie, if you don't mind me putting you on a spot, I mean, it kind of, to put you in a sort of the ambassador for USA, does this sort of seem like something that would make sense in the US context? Is this something that you could imagine in a way that could you run run something similar in the US funding environment.
That's interesting to ask. Yeah, I mean, I do, from what I can understand, things that come to mind as far as that there's funding, that so you're giving someone some money, which I think that's a nice incentivizer, certainly. Yeah, I can't really, I'm trying to see how maybe European versus a US environment is really any different. I think I would more want to think about maybe the global south of getting more participation from the global south through such a program. That seems more interesting personally to me. But and I think, yeah, funding people attending conferences is always such a great idea, you know, because if you don't go to conferences, you aren't exposed to ideas. It's just, and you physically go, you know, you physically talk to people. And so if this ambassador actually funds people attending conferences, your conferences and others, yeah, that would be a really great idea to expand, yeah, to the global south. So yeah, that's my only thought.
Yeah, I think we have discussed the early career and outreach to them and looking into the interest group that is working with the early career researchers. And I think the global south is another thing where I think looking into funding opportunities in that domain. I think that's something that would be quite useful. I think in terms of impact and so on. I think there is sort of, let's say, setting up the skeleton in a way, looking at the programs that have been run and creating this group. I think that might be something that you would need to at least work in parallel, so that you have because then also if you have in the end funding agencies, in many cases they would look into, okay, what's in it for Europe, and I think we can make a pretty good business case in a way that, okay, funding a European network of ambassadors and project actually, it probably sort of the return on investment was pretty good. So then once you have that data, then you're saying that, okay, well, let's do this also with the global south. I think
Okay,
it
I'm
might
sorry,
be easier.
I'm going to be very rude because my doorbell is ringing. Hold on just one moment.
Sure.
Well, maybe while we're waiting for Rosalie to get her FedEx or whatever is is being delivered to her door, I can remind us all that there was another activity that we were supposed to complete before we, I don't know, just continue to have a conversation for the next half hour while this session wraps up. We are supposed to vote on activities. So we talked a little bit about the point of the charter, but the point, and I think we're more or less all kind of agreed on those broad goals. But what do we do? What do we do to actually support those goals? There's a lot of different ideas kicking around, and obviously limited capacity to do everything, basically. So, Matti, the drop-in sessions that you suggested that we restart the things that you had been hosting with the open call grantees and with the ambassadors, that's something that I'm kind of happy to keep going. And I suspect there's probably a lot of interest once we get this into some sort of regular rhythm and on people's schedules, find the right time where everyone is available to meet, or maybe have multiple drop-in sessions that happen at different times. What else could we be doing? What are there things outside of those kind of casual connection conversations? And in the chart, or sorry, not the charter document, the collaborative notes document, there is a table there where we can vote on themes and activities. And Allison has actually designed a very nice chart, which has kind of grouped them. So we can look at a few activities that are related to cross-community exchange, some activities related to building the network, all of those different kind of high level themes that we talked about. The idea is we could just take a couple of quiet minutes and put a little plus sign next to any of the activities that we'd like to see. I think you're probably not supposed to vote for one activity more than once, but I think you could vote for all of the activities if you actually wanted to. The voting, thank you, Matty.
I shouldn't vote twice because
second one.
I voted in a previous table, so I probably shouldn't vote again.
Yeah, so you'd skew our results, wouldn't you?
I'll take a look at the table, but I do have another meeting, so I do have to leave.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me sit in, and I'm a little more enlightened, so I appreciate that. And
thank you very much for joining.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Yeah, see you.